Commander Vextor of the Andorian fleet had witnessed approximately 372 weapon demonstrations during his tenure on the Galactic Defense Coalition's Armament Review Board. He considered himself, quite reasonably, an expert on destructive technology. Plasma rifles, elegant graviton disruptors, magnificent molecular destabilizers, chef's kiss, if he had lips capable of such a gesture. So when the human engineer walked into the testing chamber carrying what appeared to be a sharpened piece of scrap metal attached to a wooden stick, Vextor experienced something his species rarely felt: second-hand embarrassment. Esteemed council members, the human woman said, her voice steady despite the barely concealed snickering rippling through the observation deck. My name is Kira Vance, and I'm here to present a weapon system that has served humanity for over 10,000 years. She held up the object. It looked like something a child might craft in a remedial metalworking class. The blade, if one could call it that, was roughly wedge-shaped, attached to a handle that appeared to be carved from actual tree matter, not synthetic composite, not nano-enhanced polymer, actual dead plant fiber. Counselor Rethin, a Peluvian whose species had mastered energy weapons before humans discovered fire, let out a whistling laugh through his breathing slits. Is this a joke? Did the humans send us a comedian instead of an engineer? Kira's expression didn't change. Vextor found that mildly interesting. Most species, when mocked by a Peluvian, showed some physiological stress response. Humans, apparently, just stood there with that unsettling stillness they were known for. This, Kira continued, rotating the primitive weapon in her hands, is called a throwing axe. Before you dismiss it entirely, I'd like to request a simple demonstration. By all means, Vextor said, gesturing with his primary manipulator appendage. Might as well let this play out. The entertainment value alone would make the requisition forms worthwhile. Tech Officer Mern, please activate a standard target drone. Standard, sir. Mern's antennae twitched with what Vextor recognized as confusion. For a thrown projectile? Shouldn't we use something more appropriate? Perhaps a stationary gel block? Standard drone, Vextor repeated. Let the humans learn this lesson quickly. Their species had only joined the coalition 6 months ago. They needed to understand that the galaxy operated on a different technological level than their quaint little planet. The target drone materialized in the testing range, hovering 3 meters off the ground. It was equipped with Class C deflector shields, the same kind used on reconnaissance vehicles. Overkill for a chunk of metal, certainly, but regulations were regulations. Kira stepped up to the firing line, that ridiculous weapon held loosely in her right hand. She was small by human standards, Vextor noted from her file. Approximately 163 centimeters, 62 kilograms. Her species averaged larger, which meant she was either young or simply built on a lighter frame. Whenever you're ready, Engineer Vance, Vextor said, settling back into his observation chair. This would take approximately 4 seconds. 3 for her to throw the primitive tool, 1 for it to bounce harmlessly off the shield. And then they could move on to actual weapon systems. Kira's arm moved. That's the only way Vextor could describe it later in his incident report. Her arm simply moved. There was no wind-up, no elaborate throwing motion like he'd seen in human recreational activities. One moment the axe was in her hand, the next it was a blur crossing the 30-meter distance to the drone. The sound came first, a sharp crack that made every being in the observation deck flinch. Then came the visual. The drone's shield flickering, sputtering, and collapsing entirely as the axe punched through it like it was decorative tissue paper. The blade buried itself in the drone's central processor with a meaty thunk that seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly silent chamber. The drone fell from the air, sparking and dead. Kira turned back to face the observation deck, her expression still neutral. Questions? Vextor's 3 hearts were doing something rhythmic and uncomfortable in his chest cavity. That shield could withstand sustained pulse rifle fire for 90 seconds. It could deflect micro-missiles it had in previous tests laughed in the face of shaped charges. It had not survived 4/10 of a second against a sharp rock on a stick thrown by a small human female. Counselor Rathsen had stopped whistling. Vextor's memory cores replayed the scene from 6 months prior with perfect clarity, which was at this particular moment unfortunate. He would have preferred a faulty recollection. The human delegation had arrived at Coalition headquarters aboard a vessel that barely qualified as faster-than-light capable. It limped into dock like a wounded sand crawler, burning fuel inefficiently and broadcasting radio signals that any competent military force could intercept from 3-star systems away. The Andorian High Command had immediately classified humanity as Category 7, technologically inferior, strategically negligible, potentially useful as a buffer zone. "We wish to contribute to the Coalition's defense initiatives," the human ambassador had announced. His name was Gerald Chen, and he had the audacity to smile while saying it, as if offering primitive assistance to a multi-species alliance that had been defending the galaxy for 4,000 years. Vexthor had reviewed their weapons catalog with growing amusement. Kinetic firearms that required chemical propellants, explosive device that needed physical detonation, missiles that flew in predictable arcs. It was like watching a species try to fight a forest fire with spit and determination. "Your conventional armaments are, how should I phrase this diplomatically, outdated by approximately 2,000 years, Vexthor had explained during the initial assessment meeting. "We appreciate your enthusiasm, but the Coalition faces threats that your projectile weapons simply cannot address. The Krill Swarm uses adaptive bioarmor. The synthetic Concordat employs phase-shifting assault units. Your bullets would be, and I mean this with utmost respect, completely useless." Gerald Chen had nodded, still smiling that unsettling human smile. "We understand. However, we'd like to propose something unconventional, more unconventional than chemical explosives." Councillor Rathsan had muttered. "We'd like to demonstrate some of our historical weapon systems," Chen continued, ignoring the comment. "Tools and armaments that predate our modern military by centuries, sometimes millennia." The silence in the chamber had been profound. "You want," Vextor said slowly, ensuring his translator was functioning correctly, "to show us weapons that are outdated even by your own primitive standards." "Precisely. Why in the name of the first stars would we waste Coalition resources evaluating weapons your own species abandoned?" Chen's smile had widened. "Because we didn't abandon them due to ineffectiveness, Commander. We abandoned them because we found more efficient ways to kill each other from greater distances. But efficiency and effectiveness aren't always the same thing. Our historical weapons have one advantage your energy-based systems lack. And what advantage would that be? They're kinetic. Pure, simple physical force. No energy signature to detect, no emissions to track, no power source to drain, just mass, velocity and several thousand years of refined technique." Vextor had authorized the demonstration request mostly out of morbid curiosity. The paperwork alone would be comedy material for months. Testing Stone Age technology in a facility designed to evaluate weapons capable of cracking planets. Absurd. Entertaining but absurd. He had expected primitive spears, maybe some archaic bladed weapons, something quaint to photograph for the Coalition archives under the category of galactic oddities. He had not expected Kira Vance and her ancestors' nightmare on a stick to demolish a military-grade shield like it was made of wishful thinking and prayer. His past self had been an idiot. The observation deck remained frozen in what Vextor could only describe as collective stupefaction. 17 different species, representing the Coalition's finest military minds, stared at the sparking remains of the target drone with expressions ranging from disbelief to existential crisis. Tech Officer Murn broke the silence first, his antennae rigid with confusion. "Commander, the shield integrity readings must be malfunctioning. There's no possible way a non-powered projectile achieved penetration velocity sufficient to overcome Class C deflector technology. Run a diagnostic," Vextor ordered, his voice coming out rougher than intended. His translator chip was probably malfunctioning too, because surely he hadn't just witnessed what his visual receptors insisted had occurred. Down in the testing range, Kira walked calmly to the fallen drone and pulled her axe free with a casual yank that suggested she'd done this approximately 10,000 times before. She examined the blade, wiped something off it with her thumb and returned to the firing line. "Diagnostic complete, sir," Murn announced, his tone suggesting he wished the diagnostic had been incomplete. All sensors functioned within normal parameters. The shield was operating at full strength when it failed. Councillor Rothson's breathing slits fluttered rapidly. A Peluvian stress indicator. Impossible. The kinetic energy required to breach that shield would demand velocities approaching .003 light speed. No biological organism can generate that kind of force through muscle contraction alone. "Perhaps it's the metal composition," offered Councillor Tilmara, a crystalline being whose species communicated primarily through light refraction. Her surface flickered nervously. "Some unknown earth alloy with exotic properties?" Vextor activated the analysis scanner, targeting the axe in Kira's hand. The results appeared on his screen instantly. Iron, carbon, chromium, standard steel composition. Nothing exotic. Nothing special. Just sharpened metal that had somehow decided to violate several fundamental laws of physics.
Engineer Vance.
Vex Tower activated the communication channel, proud that his voice only trembled slightly. Would you mind explaining what just happened? Kira looked up at the observation deck, shielding her eyes from the testing range's overhead illumination. I threw my axe. It hit the target. Was the demonstration unclear? Several council members made choking sounds. The demonstration was perhaps too clear, Vexthor replied. What I meant was, how did a primitive throwing weapon penetrate military-grade shielding? Oh, that. Kira hefted the axe, spinning it casually in her grip. The council members nearest the observation window flinched backward. Your shields are designed to dissipate energy over a wide surface area, right? Spread the impact. Reduce the force per square centimeter. Correct, Murn said, his voice academic despite his obvious distress. Standard deflection physics. Energy distribution reduces penetration capability. Right, but my axe doesn't care about your energy distribution. Kira pointed to the blade's edge. This focuses all the kinetic energy into a surface area of approximately 0.5 square centimeters. Your shield tried to spread the impact, but there wasn't enough surface area to spread it to. The force per centimeter ratio exceeded your shield's dispersion threshold, so it punched through. She said this like she was explaining basic mathematics to younglings. But the velocity, Tilmara protested, her crystalline structure pulsing with agitated colors. The required velocity to generate sufficient force. No biological being should be capable of that. Kira's mouth quirked upward in what Vexthor had learned was a human smile. It looked predatory. You'd be surprised what humans are capable of, counselor. We evolved on a planet with 1.3 times galactic standard gravity. Our muscle density is approximately 40% higher than most spacefaring species. What feels like a casual throw to me generates force that your shields weren't programmed to anticipate. One throw could be a fluke, Counselor Rathson said, his whistling voice regaining some of its earlier condescension. Coincidence, favorable angles, shield malfunction despite the diagnostics. I propose we test again with multiple shield configurations. Happy to oblige, Kira said cheerfully. Tech Officer Murn deployed 3 more drones, each equipped with different shielding types. Class C deflector like before, Class B military-grade barrier, and a Class A personal defense shield typically reserved for high-value targets. The drones arranged themselves at varying distances: 20 meters, 40 meters, and 60 meters. All 3 targets are active and shielded, Commander, Murn reported. His antennae were drooping now, a sign of resignation. Proceed when ready, Engineer Vance, Vexthor said, leaning forward in his observation chair despite himself. Kira didn't even stretch or warm up. She simply drew her arm back and threw. The axe spun through the air with a whistling sound that seemed somehow reproachful, as if the weapon itself was annoyed at being doubted. It struck the nearest drone's Class C shield, punched through like the shield was a polite suggestion rather than a barrier, and continued spinning. The blade severed the drone's stabilizer, causing it to lurch sideways directly into the path of the second drone. They collided with a spectacular crunch of metal and sparking circuitry. The axe, undeterred by this mechanical carnage, ricocheted off the wreckage at an angle that seemed mathematically improbable and struck the third drone's Class A shield. There was a brilliant flash as the shield overloaded, trying to compensate for the concentrated kinetic impact, then failed completely. The axe embedded itself in the drone's central core. All 3 drones fell to the testing range floor in a heap of smoking technology and shattered assumptions. Kira walked over, stepped on one drone for leverage, and yanked her axe free. She looked up at the observation deck and shrugged. Nobody left this time. Vexthor authorized an emergency technical analysis team to enter the testing range before Kira had even returned to the observation deck. 6 specialists in various fields of weapons technology descended on the wreckage like scavengers on a fresh carcass. Scanners humming, data tablets recording every microscopic detail. Lead physicist Dr. Quomtar, a Vorsian whose species had invented energy shielding technology 1800 years ago, examined the penetration points with 4 of his 7 eye stalks, while the remaining 3 swiveled nervously. This is, forgive my language, completely unacceptable according to every established principle of defensive physics. Show me the calculations, Vexthor demanded, pulling up the data stream on his command tablet. The numbers appeared, and they made his 3 hearts sink in his chest cavity. The axe had been traveling at approximately 47 meters per second when it impacted the first shield. That velocity should have been laughable. Plasma bolts traveled at light speed. Graviton pulses warped space-time itself, 47 meters per second was slower than most atmospheric transit vehicles. The velocity is irrelevant when the mass concentration is this extreme, Dr. Quamtar explained, highlighting a three-dimensional model of the impact. Look at the force distribution. The entire kinetic energy of the throw, which admittedly is substantial given human muscle density, focuses into an edge measuring 0.48 centimeters wide. The shield's energy matrix attempts to disperse the impact, but it's designed for wide area effects, explosions, energy beams, things with dispersion patterns. This weapon is the opposite of dispersed. It's concentrated malice with an edge. Counselor Tilmara's crystalline surface had shifted to a murky brown color, indicating deep confusion. But our shields have withstood concentrated beam weapons before. Laser cutters, plasma torches, molecular disruptors. All of those focus energy into narrow points. Those emit energy signatures that shields can detect and compensate for milliseconds before impact, Dr. Quamtar countered, his eye stalks waving in agitation. This primitive weapon has no energy signature, no electromagnetic emissions, no thermal bloom, nothing. The shield's predictive algorithms never engaged because there was nothing to predict. By the time the physical mass registered on sensors, it was already punching through the barrier. That's ridiculous, Counselor Rathzen wheezed, his breathing slits working overtime. Are you suggesting that our defensive technology, refined over millennia, is vulnerable to sharpened metal thrown by hand? I'm not suggesting it, Counselor. I'm reading it directly from the impact forensics. Vexthor rubbed his temples with his secondary manipulator appendages, a headache forming behind his ocular implants.
What about the ricochet shot?
The one that took out all three drones. Don't even get me started on the ricochet shot, Dr. Quamtar muttered, pulling up another data stream. The angle calculations alone violate 6 principles of momentum conservation. She somehow imparted spin to the weapon that allowed it to maintain angular momentum through the collision, redirect off the wreckage at a 73-degree angle, and still retain sufficient velocity to thwart a Class A shield. Do you understand how much three-dimensional spatial awareness that requires? The human brain processed trajectory, mass, velocity, collision dynamics, and secondary impact vectors in approximately 0.8 seconds. Maybe she got lucky, someone suggested weakly from the back of the observation deck. Twice? Dr. Quamtar's eye stalks swiveled to fix the speaker with a withering stare. She got lucky twice in a row with completely different shield configurations and drone positions. Vexthor made a decision he suspected he would regret. Bring her back. I want another demonstration. Commander, with respect, how many more drones do you want destroyed? Myrn asked.
All of them if necessary.
Set up 10 targets this time. Varying distances, different shield types, randomized positions. If this human can replicate these results against multiple targets under controlled variables, then we need to completely recalibrate our understanding of kinetic warfare. And if she can't replicate the results? Tilmara asked hopefully. Vexthor looked down at the testing range where Kira stood examining her axe blade, running her thumb along the edge with casual familiarity. Then we'll know the first demonstration was an anomaly, file a curious incident report, and move on with our lives. He didn't believe that for a second, and judging by the expressions on the council members' faces, neither did they. Dr. Quamtar began deploying additional target drones, muttering calculations under his breath about muscle fiber density and primitive violence. Vexthor suspected the physicist's entire worldview was currently experiencing catastrophic structural failure. He could relate. The galaxy had seemed so much simpler 3 hours ago, before humanity decided to weaponize basic physics and ruin everyone's day. 10 target drones materialized in the testing range, arranged in a configuration that Dr. Quamtar assured everyone was scientifically randomized. 3 hovered at standard height, 4 were positioned near the ceiling supports, 2 hugged the floor, and 1 sat dead center at maximum range 90 meters from the firing line. This is excessive, Kira observed, returning to her position. I only brought 1 axe. You won't need more than 1, Vexthor said, suspecting he was about to regret this entire military career. Demonstrate your maximum capability, Engineer Vance. Show us what this weapon system can actually do. Kira tilted her head, considering the layout. Then she smiled, that predatory human smile again. You want maximum capability? All right, don't blink. She threw. The axe hit the nearest drone, carving through its Class B shield like the barrier had personally offended it. But instead of embedding in the machinery, the blade caught the drone's edge at an angle, redirecting upward. The weapon spun toward the ceiling support beam, which was constructed from reinforced titanium composite rated to hold 6,000 kilograms. The axe severed it. The beam groaned, sagged and collapsed onto two of the elevated drones, crushing them like discarded beverage containers. The axe ricocheted off the falling beam, angled downward, and punctured a floor-level drone before bouncing horizontally toward the far wall, where it struck the reinforced barrier plating. The barrier, designed to contain explosive detonations up to Class 5 yield, developed a crack that spiderwebbed outward with a sound like breaking ice. The axe rebounded again, now traveling parallel to the ground, and took out another drone at knee height before finally embedding itself in the center-range target with a decisive thunk. Silence filled the observation deck like a physical presence. 6 drones destroyed, 1 support beam severed, barrier plating compromised, 1 axe, 1 throw. Sweet merciful stars, Myrn whispered, his antennae lying completely flat against his head in submission. Counselor Rathazen made a sound like air escaping from a punctured seal. That's not possible. That can't. The angles alone. The force retention through multiple impacts. This violates this. I need to sit down. He was already sitting down. Emergency meeting, Vexter announced, his voice sounding distant to his own auditory receptors. All council members, conference room 7, immediately. Dr. Quilmantar, I want a full physics report on my desk in 1 hour explaining how any of what we just witnessed is possible. Commander, I'm not sure I can, the physicist protested weakly. Then explain why it's impossible in a way that accounts for the 6 destroyed drones currently sparking on the testing range floor. Vexthor activated his communicator to the Coalition's military command. This is Commander Vexthor, authorization code 97 Echo Delta. I need an immediate tactical assessment team assembled. Priority classification critical. Nature of the threat, Commander. The response came. Vextor watched Kira walk across the testing range, step over wreckage and retrieve her axe from the final drone. She checked the blade for damage, seemed satisfied and tucked it into a loop on her belt like she'd just finished a routine equipment check. The threat, Vextor said slowly, is that we've been designing our defensive systems under fundamentally flawed assumptions for approximately 4,000 years, and a human just proved it using a weapon her species invented before they discovered metalworking. A pause on the other end. Sir, could you repeat that? You heard me correctly. Assemble the team. We have a lot of security protocols to reconsider. Down in the testing range, Kira looked up at the observation deck and gave a small wave. Vextelver's 3 hearts were doing something arrhythmic and deeply concerning. The emergency meeting was going to be a nightmare. Conference room 7 had never felt so small despite being designed to accommodate 47 different species comfortably. Vextiptes stood at the head of the tactical display table while Dr. Quilmantor projected 3-dimensional models of human musculature that looked frankly terrifying when rendered at scale. Let me ensure I understand this correctly, Counselor Tilmara said, her crystalline structure flickering between confused purple and alarmed orange. Humans are physically stronger than 83% of known spacefaring species, and we classified them as Category 7, minimal threat. In our defense, Myrn offered weakly, they're smaller than most military-capable species. Their average height is only 1.7 meters. We assumed, quite reasonably I thought, that smaller meant weaker. Dr. Quelmtar made a derisive sound through his breathing apparatus. That assumption ignores planetary evolution entirely. Earth's gravity is 1.3 times galactic standard. Every single human evolved under constant pressure that would exhaust most of us within hours. Their bones are denser. Their muscle fibers are compacted. Their cardiovascular systems pump harder just to maintain basic function. He highlighted a cross-section of human muscle tissue next to Mondorian tissue. The difference was startling. Where Vextelvor's species had elegant elongated muscle fibers optimized for efficiency, human muscles looked like tightly wound cables, layered over each other in redundant systems. They're built like biological siege equipment, Dr. Quilmtar continued. Look at this skeletal structure. Their bones can withstand impacts that would shatter most species' frames. Their joints are reinforced with cartilage and connective tissue that functions like natural shock absorbers. And here's the part that should concern everyone. They don't even realize how strong they are relative to galactic norms because on their own world they're average. Counselor Rathsen had regained some composure, though his breathing slits still fluttered nervously. What about fatigue? Surely maintaining that muscle density requires enormous energy expenditure. They must tire quickly. Actually, no. Dr. Quelmtar pulled up metabolic comparison charts. Human endurance is frankly absurd. Their ancestors hunted prey by literally chasing animals until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They call it persistence hunting. Some humans can run for hours, even days without stopping. Their cooling system, the sweating mechanism, is remarkably efficient at heat dispersion. Vextor felt something cold settling in his primary stomach. So when Engineer Vance threw that axe multiple times without visible fatigue, she was barely exerting herself by human standards. I reviewed her physiological readings during the demonstration. Her heart rate increased by 12%. 12. A Peluvian performing equivalent exertion would show increases of 60 to 70%. The room fell silent except for the hum of the projection system. There's more, Dr. Quomtar added, because apparently the galaxy needed additional reasons for concern. Human spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination evolved from their arboreal ancestors, tree-dwelling creatures that needed to calculate three-dimensional trajectories while swinging between branches. They can track multiple moving objects simultaneously, predict intersection points, and adjust their throws mid-motion using something called proprioception. That ricochet shot that destroyed 3 drones, she calculated that trajectory instinctively, probably in under a second. Instinctively, Vextelva repeated flatly. Their brains are wired for kinetic problem-solving. Throw rock, hit target, eat dinner. Millions of years of evolutionary programming. Counselor Tilmara shifted to a pale yellow, indicating resigned acceptance. So what you're telling us is that humans are dense-boned, high-endurance, precision-targeting biological weapons platforms that evolved under extreme gravity, and we invited them to join the coalition thinking they needed our protection. That's an accurate summary, yes. Vextor looked around the conference table at the assembled military leadership of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Every face, regardless of species, wore the same expression, the dawning realization that perhaps, just perhaps, they had fundamentally misunderstood what humanity was bringing to this alliance. I want full combat trials, Vextor announced. If one human with one primitive weapon can devastate our defensive systems, I need to know what happens when they encounter actual combat scenarios. Are you certain that's wise, Commander? Myrn asked quietly. Vextor thought about Kira's casual wave after destroying 6 drones and compromising their testing facility's structural integrity. Wise? Absolutely not. Necessary? Without question. The formal request took 30 minutes to draft, and required signatures from 7 different department heads, which Vextelvor considered a new personal record for military bureaucracy. The message transmitted to Kira's temporary quarters was deliberately professional, carefully worded to avoid any suggestion that the entire coalition military command was experiencing collective panic. Her response arrived 4 minutes later. Sure, sounds fun. When? Sounds fun. The human thought combat trials against military-grade attack drones sounded fun. Vextor was beginning to understand why Earth's history files were 70% warfare. The combat simulation arena occupied sub-level 9 of the Coalition headquarters, a massive cylindrical space designed to replicate battlefield conditions, 40 meters in diameter, 15 meters high, with variable terrain generators and environmental controls that could simulate everything from frozen wastelands to volcanic hellscapes. Standard combat drone configuration? Tech Officer Myrn asked, pulling up the arena control interface. Negative, Vextor decided. Use the Mark 7 hunter-killers. The ones we deploy against Krull Swarm infiltrators. Every head in the control room turned toward him. Commander, those are designed to eliminate heavily armored targets, Dr. Quomtar protested. They're equipped with plasma cutters and kinetic dampeners. Against an unarmored human with a hand weapon, that's not a test. That's an execution. Engineer Vance destroyed 6 shielded drones and structural supports with 1 throw. Vextor countered. I think she can handle it. Besides, we need realistic data. If humans are going to integrate into coalition forces, we need to know their combat limitations, not just their party tricks. Down in the preparation area, Kira was stretching, rolling her shoulders and neck with movements that produced audible popping sounds that made several observers wince. She'd changed into what she called tactical gear, fitted black clothing that apparently provided 0 protection but allowed full range of motion. She carried 3 throwing axes now, secured in loops across her back. 3 axes. Counselor Rathson observed from the viewing gallery. She brought 3 axes to fight automated killing machines. Want to place a wager on the outcome? Counselor Tilmara asked, her crystalline structure flickering with what might have been amusement. That's highly inappropriate for military officials, Rathson replied primly. I'll put 50 credits on the human lasting under 2 minutes. Someone called from the back of the gallery. 70 credits says she doesn't land a single hit. Another voice added. Rithazem's breathing slits fluttered. 100 credits says she destroys at least 2 drones before tactical withdrawal. So much for inappropriate. Vextor ignored the growing betting pool and focused on the arena setup. The terrain generator had created a landscape of broken pillars, debris fields, and elevated platforms. Cover options, vertical advantages, choke points, a proper combat environment. 5 Mark 7 hunter-killers materialized at strategic positions around the arena. Each one was twice Kira's size, equipped with articulated limbs for rapid movement, targeting sensors capable of tracking objects moving at supersonic speeds, and enough weaponry to reduce a light vehicle to constituent atoms.
Engineer Vance, can you hear me?
Vextor activated the communication channel. Loud and clear, Commander. Kira drew one axe from her back, tested its weight. So what are the rules? Survive a certain duration, destroy all targets. Try not to damage your expensive equipment too badly. That last question was delivered with a tone that suggested she was joking. Vextor suspected she was not joking at all. Eliminate all hostiles or survive for 5 minutes, whichever comes first. Got it. Should I wait for a countdown or something? Simulation begins in 10 seconds. 9, 8. Kara settled into a stance that looked deceptively relaxed. 3, 2, 1. Begin. The hunter-killers activated with synchronized precision, their targeting sensors immediately locking onto the lone human standing in the open. Then things got interesting. The first hunter-killer launched itself from an elevated platform, plasma cutter already charging with a high-pitched whine that meant imminent death for most organic beings. It covered 12 meters in under a second, limbs articulated for maximum striking efficiency. Kira threw her axe sidearm. The weapon spun horizontally through the air, struck the drone's central sensor cluster, and punched clean through the reinforced casing. The hunter-killer's momentum carried it forward another 3 meters before its systems registered catastrophic failure and it crashed into the arena floor, sparking and twitching. Kira was already moving. She sprinted toward the fallen drone, not away from the remaining 4 targets, which Vextor's tactical training insisted was completely backward. Running toward threats violated every survival protocol in the Coalition military handbook. 2 more hunter-killers converged on her position from opposite angles, a pincer movement designed to eliminate escape vectors. Their targeting computers calculated intercept points, adjusted for human running speed, and prepared to fire. Kira actually slid, dropping to the ground and using her momentum to skid beneath the first drone's plasma burst, which sizzled through the space where her torso had been 0.3 seconds earlier. She grabbed her embedded axe as she passed the disabled drone, yanked it free without breaking stride, and came up throwing in one fluid motion. The axe caught the second hunter-killer mid-flight, shearing through its primary limb articulation. The drone listed sideways, compensated with its remaining limbs, and attempted to reacquire targeting lock. Kira had already drawn her second axe. This throw was different. Overhand, with her full body rotation behind it, the axe tumbled through the air end over end and struck the damaged hunter-killer with enough force to send it careening into a support pillar. The collision destroyed both the drone and part of the pillar, which collapsed and created a debris cloud that obscured the arena sensors. I can't get a clear reading, Myrn reported, frantically adjusting scanners. The dust is interfering with thermal tracking. Through the observation window, Vextelvor could barely make out movement in the swirling debris. The remaining 3 hunter-killers had spread out, using their sensors to penetrate the obscurement. Their programming adapted to the environmental change, switching to motion detection and predictive algorithms. Something flew out of the dust cloud. Not an axe. A piece of broken pillar, roughly the size of a human head. All 3 hunter-killers tracked it, their targeting systems identifying it as a potential threat. Kira emerged from a completely different angle, her third axe already in motion. The weapon struck the nearest drone's power core, and the resulting explosion created a chain reaction that damaged the 4th hunter-killer's stabilization system. It wobbled, attempted to compensate, and crashed into the arena wall hard enough to leave an impact crater. 4 down, 1 remaining. The final hunter-killer had learned. It retreated to maximum range, putting distance between itself and the terrifying human who treated combat drones like target practice. Its plasma cutter charged to full power, preparing for a sustained barrage that would overwhelm any attempt at evasion. Kira had no axes left. They were embedded in destroyed drones scattered across the arena. She picked up another piece of debris, a jagged chunk of the broken pillar, and hurled it like a discus. The hunter-killer's defensive protocols engaged, firing a plasma burst that vaporized the incoming projectile, which was exactly what Kira wanted. She'd already closed half the distance while the drone was distracted, sprinting with a speed that made Vextor's own species look positively sedentary. The hunter-killer reacquired targeting lock, adjusted aim, began firing. Kira dodged, not with any fancy acrobatics, just sharp directional changes that put her consistently 0.2 seconds ahead of the drone's predictive algorithms. Left, right, forward roll, lateral jump. The plasma burst scorched the ground where she'd been, never where she was. She reached the first destroyed drone, grabbed her axe, spun and threw in one continuous motion. The final hunter-killer had no time to process the threat. The axe struck its central processor at an angle that suggested Kira had calculated the precise trajectory while actively dodging plasma fire. The drone died mid-targeting sequence. Silence filled the arena except for the crackling of electrical fires and the sound of Kira breathing heavily. She'd survived. No, Vextelvor corrected himself. She'd dominated. The timer read 1 minute and 47 seconds. In the viewing gallery, nobody moved to collect their betting winnings. Vextor spent 3 hours rewriting his official assessment report, deleting phrases like technologically inferior and negligible strategic value, and replacing them with terminology that wouldn't make him look like a complete fool to Coalition High Command. The final report read, "Humanity represents an unconventional but highly effective military asset. Recommendation: immediate integration into Coalition Special Operations units. Secondary recommendation: comprehensive review of all defensive systems with focus on kinetic vulnerability assessment." He paused, considered his career longevity and added, "Tertiary recommendation: never, under any circumstances, underestimate human capability based on perceived technological simplicity." The response from High Command arrived within 6 hours, which was approximately 5 hours and 30 minutes faster than usual. Apparently someone important had watched the arena footage. Human historical weapons systems were approved for Coalition use, effective immediately. Furthermore, and this was the part that made Vextelvor question reality itself, 17 different species had submitted formal requests for human combat instruction programs. 17. The Peluvians, who'd invented energy weapons before humans discovered agriculture, wanted to learn how to throw axes. Kira took the news with characteristic human casualness. "Sure, I can teach. Fair warning though, most species don't have the muscle density for proper technique. We'll need to develop modified throwing styles for different physiologies." "You've already considered training adaptations for alien species," Vextor said, not quite making it a question. "Commander, I'm an engineer. I adapt systems for different operational parameters. People are just complicated systems." She grinned. "Besides, this is going to be hilarious. I can't wait to teach a crystalline how to throw something without shattering their own appendages." Her official title became Combat Systems Instructor, Kinetic Warfare Division. Her unofficial title, whispered through Coalition military channels with equal parts respect and terror, was the human who broke physics with a sharpened stick. 6 months later, Vextel watched a mixed-species combat unit deploy into a hostile zone carrying a combination of plasma rifles and absurdly throwing axes. The unit designation Vance's Irregulars. They had a 93% mission success rate. Humanity had been in the Coalition for 1 year, and they'd already revolutionized warfare by reaching 4,000 years backward into their own violent history. Vextelvor updated his personal log with a single sentence. "Note to self: when humans offer to help, never assume you understand what help means." In the training facility below, Kira was teaching a Peluvian how to grip an axe handle properly. The galaxy, Vextel reflected, was becoming a much more interesting and terrifying place. He wouldn't have it any other way.